Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest introduced to you now. Michael Collins is known as the sugar free man, a regular guy who decided years ago, through lots of research and testing his own formerly sick body, that sugar might be doing much more harm than the sweet taste was tricking us into. He also saw behavior change in children when they ate the stuff and grown-ups acting very irrationally towards needing the stuff, which isn't to mention folks who ate a lot of sugar and who seemed to get sicker and sicker with a whole host of diseases and conditions, including gaining a lot of extra weight and diabetes. Using the powers granted to him by the freedom from sugar, Michael then morphed into a voice for kids and adults who are wanting to change their relationship with sugar. Michael, the sugar free man, believes in the good of all people and couldn't believe that the superheroes from ads and the folks who sold sugar would want to harm us or our kiddos. The sugar free man had to change into the lone superhero fighting the good fight against sugar. Since we're all here just to get the facts, the science and the results of thousands of people who have successfully quit sugar are evidence of its effect on health and happiness. Michael Collins, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Balanced Body Radio.
Casey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's such an honor to host you. I followed you for a very long time in this space. Heard you on a lot of different podcasts, including my friends Dr. Philip Ovadia and their podcasts. You do a wonderful job, and it's such an honor to host you here.
Thanks for having me. That was fun on Dr. Phil's thing. That was great. That was
Yeah,
wonderful. He's
yeah, it's a fun show with him and Jack kind of both hosting the show and asking questions and playing off each other. It's one of my favorites. I try to catch every week. And obviously, I think a lot of people would mistake you for the Michael Collins, who I think a lot of people would probably tell you landed on the moon, but actually did not land on the moon.
I'm very familiar with it. I would give away my age, but it was they landed on the moon on my birthday. And
Wow.
I did follow Michael his career, and you're correct. He was supposed to step on the moon, and then a last minute switch, and he ended up in the orbiter. So
Yep, that's right. That's
and
right.
there's
No, I
also another Michael Collins who played Liam Neeson played the Irish Revolutionary War hero. Uh,
that's right.
it was pretty wild. It's a wild story. He died at 32, but literally liberated Ireland from England. It was pretty.
Wow.
It's a cool story.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, there's a few of you out there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah, no, when I was a kid, I was such a huge space nerd, and I had a book that had all of the different missions that were run up until the space shuttle. So all the Mercury program, the Gemini program, the Apollo program, and at some point I could tell you all of the astronauts who did the individual missions, what they accomplished, what their patches were, like all that stuff. I had like absolutely memorized for some reason. So not anymore, but there was a day.
Well, you can tell because very, very few people know about Michael Collins, the astronaut's history and the first lunar landing. He really, very few people.
Yeah.
They know about Neil and Buzz, but they don't know about Michael.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he was the one in the spacecraft, orbiting the moon as the other guys were walking on the moon for the first time. So, anyway, cool stuff. I could nerd out on space stuff all day, but we're here to talk primarily about sugar. And so, my first question to you is: do you consider sugar a food or a drug?
Unequivocally, with no exception and no argument, it's a drug. It's a processed, down to no uh, worthwhile nutrients at all. And it's very similar to the processing of cocaine. It's like they think of coca leaves as you chew them, you get a little bit of a buzz. But when it's processed, forget about processed into crack, but it's processed into just powder, it's a drug. And sugar is the same. And it's what that question may be the most important question of this entire society and world going forward in the next 20 or 30 years. It is going to bankrupt the British and the Canadian governments with blood sugar dysregulation, diabetes, weight gain, obesity, heart disease, fatty liver. They're just not going to be able to sustain. 93% of the people in the United States are not metabolically healthy. And it's because of primarily sugar and ultra processed carbohydrates, which are also drugs, by the way.
Yeah.
Flour is also a drug.
Wow.
So an important question, and no one's ever asked me that right up front. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I really wanted to get that out of the way. And I live in a place that largely, I live in the Salt Lake Valley, so there's a lot of people of the Mormon faith around here. And so they are avoiding things like alcohol, they're avoiding drugs, they don't even drink coffee or tea, for example. And so, what we see around here, what we're getting famous for when, there's these shows like The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City or whatever, is our soda shops. We have soda shops seemingly on every corner, and not only do they sell giant sodas, but they pump extra flavoring inside them and fill them with cookies. And that's perfectly okay. That's not part of the health code that most Mormons live by, that you can have as much sugar as you want. I grew up Mormon and we had tons of sugar around all the time. And so it's really interesting when we say unequivocally this is a drug, yet I'm not I don't have the wherewithal to go find cocaine in my neighborhood. I don't even know who to ask, but I can go, right down the street and go buy a bucket of sugar. If that's a drug that's just as dangerous, why is that so, cheap and available to me? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's kind of sad, really. And, it's weird coming from our ecosystem where we've done a summit for 12, 13 years, where we've talked to 400 or 500 of the world's leading experts. And it's almost like there's a group of people who know about this, and then 99 or 98% of the rest of the population has no earthly idea about the dangers of it. I mean, the true metabolic dangers of it. A lot of people think it's just aging, that all of their ailments are just aging, their skin, their eyes. They think it's, I'm getting older, and the joints especially, paper rheumatoid arthritis, I swear to you, is a paper tiger. There is no, I don't even believe it exists because I believe it's sugar. 95+% of the people who work with us, their hands and knees stop hurting almost immediately. And one woman, this is 2.5 years ago, she had one knee operation, had the other one scheduled. I said, give me 90 days. This 2.5 years later, she has still not had that second operation. Everything just stopped hurting. She didn't really need the operation. And this goes on. Of all the things, this is almost a 100% clear rate. Like, people stop hurting in their joints. And that's just one thing. There's 100 other things, but
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, I'm excited to deep dive into this topic and kind of jump the gun a little bit by asking you about sugar and whether it's a drug or not. I want to hear your own personal story. You've been at this for a very, very long time. Tell us your kind of story around addiction and sugar addiction in particular.
yeah, thanks. So, this is probably, I don't know, unless someone's heard me before, this story is pretty common, but my favorite junkie in the world was my mom. My mother it's an interesting story in that her mother died when she was 8 years old. And when she passed away, they owned the country store across the way, the family did. And my grandfather made a deal with his cousin Jim that anytime my mom walked into that store, she could have any candy she wanted, just put it on his tab. And it was a wonderful, he was working and he had to move in with his sister. And so she didn't have much supervision. And so she was at the store a lot. Anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is that it was a wonderful thing to do for a child who just lost her mom. But bottom line is, it developed a love affair. And this is common with the women we work with it would be of that age or even younger, is that she grew up believing and died believing sugar is love. Sugar is how you show love. And she did that to us, not in a manipulative or mean way, but that's just what she believed. I mean, that if you share this, you're sharing love. We bake cookies every Saturday morning. We just had all kinds of we would drink Kool-Aid with 3 times the recipe, like 3 cups in that little packet. And we would have bread and butter and sugar sandwiches, and we had unfettered access to the sugar bowl. We could eat I got that sugar bowl from the estate. we could have as much sugar as we wanted on our cornflakes or our Cheerios. I mean, like no one said no, no one said don't. It was we literally would scraping like quarter or half an inch of sugar with the milk at the bottom. Anyway, fast forward. That's how I grew up. The candy around the house, the candy that we had access to, the candy that we would eat was insane. Uh, and fast forward again, I ran into beer at 14 years old. Now, this is probably the most important linchpin, the important thing of the change process that people will need as we go forward. If they take only one thing from this talk, is that the beer changed my state, like a Tony Robbins seminar. Beer changed how I felt, right? I was shy and I could go behind the school and talk to the girl, or I could go drink beer behind the school before the dance and talk to the girls. And that went on till I was 28 years old, right? And I got sober. And when I got sober, all I wanted to do was get healthy. I just wanted to not, you know, I read a book called Sugar Blues, a really famous book at the time, written by a guy who eventually married Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star, and they promoted it everywhere. Okay. And it was very, very popular. Somehow I ended up with it, and I just stuck in my head. I don't know how. Anyway, I raised a couple of kids sugar-free till they were 6 years old. Okay, after that. And if I could tell you the story, if I told you the story about my kids, you would think I was lying to you or bragging or both or dad love or whatever. But I truly believe, and now there are very large nonprofits, the first 1,000 days, that those first 1,000 days of life, uh, it the brain growth is so insane in that time period that feeding kids sugar, and also on the other end, my mother died of Alzheimer's. It's the most advanced and ascending information on the planet, which is how sugar affects the brain. Okay. And the development of the brain at six, from literally in the womb till they were 6 years old. I'm just not that smart. They're like literally rocket scientist smart, and perfect scores on their college entrance exams smart. I'm not that smart, right? Anyway, I had a regular life. I had a regular career. The kids always said I should write a book. And so in 2018, I was kind of semi-retired, right? And I was I was thinking about what I was going to do. And I wrote the book, and I started coaching people. Though, it's on Amazon, The Last Resort Sugar Detox. And I was coaching people. We were having meetings once a week, twice a week with all the people I was coaching. And I tell people I had to build the company backwards, meaning I knew that we needed meetings. We needed the support system that is meetings, and it was Zoom meetings, right? So we were meeting every, Tuesday or Wednesday, with all the people I was coaching. Anyway, then the pandemic hit, right? And all hell just broke loose. We went from 2 meetings a week to 4 or 5 meetings a day in 18 months. And that's where we are today, with 4 or 5 Zoom meetings in support a day. And it's just never slowed down. We run the summit every January and huge detoxes every once a month. And it's just, you know, 20% of the people that call me for coaching are crying. They've never told another living soul about this. They think there's something wrong with them, that they can't stop or they can't restrict or they don't understand what's happening to them. And let's go fast forward or backwards to your first question. The reason they cannot is because they are addicted to sugar. And, the idea that sugar doesn't get the respect that other drugs do is killing children. Children are getting fatty liver. It's killing adults slowly. It's really kind of sad. And a lot of people think that I'm, extreme, right? And they think that moderation is possible, but they haven't done 57,000 detoxes with people. They have not worked with thousands of people one-on-one through myself and the coaches that facilitate those meetings. People cannot stop. It's really kind of scary. I was the chairman of the board of the Food Addiction Institute during the pandemic, mostly for marketing, but I still worked with all of these other folks. And the numbers break down like this. About a third of people biochemically cannot ingest sugar without setting up cravings for more sugar. Okay. It's just a fact. You have brown eyes, I have green eyes. It's just a fact. You can't argue with this biology, right? And this is pretty much across, the hundreds of experts that I've interviewed for the summit as well. And then about a third of people we call harmful users. And harmful users are people who, if they reset and maybe take a break, they could go back to a little bit of use. And then there's that group, a third, that are probably pretty normal. They can drink anything, they can, like your friend who can have one beer and not forget it. They can just have half a cookie and we hate them. No, just kidding.
We hate them. We do not like them.
We hate them. Like, how do they do this, Anyway, that's the short version. The podcast version usually brings up more questions than it answers. That's kind of how I became then the sugar-free man came about during the pandemic, and it just stuck. So that's
Love it.
Yeah.
I love it. That's fantastic. I want to go back and ask you about that book. About what year did you find that book? And if you recall, Sugar Blues, do you know when that was written?
Yes, I do. It was written in the 1970s, I think 75, by William Duffy. Duffy was at a party one day, and he was a reporter, and a voice from behind him said he was putting 2 lumps of 2 lumps of sugar in his coffee, and the voice said, "I wouldn't have that stuff in my house, let alone my body." He turns around as Gloria Swanson, and he ends up marrying Gloria Swanson. It's a cool story. He also talks about the ascension of slavery and how the British slave trade grew the sugar trade and the rum trade and the tea trade and the coffee trade. And it's a cool story where they go to the west of Africa with empty boats, pick up the slaves, go to the Caribbean and South and America, and then load up with sugar and rum and coffee and go back to Great Britain. And they literally grew the largest El Chapo drug dealing organization in the world and took over the world from the money they made all the way to India and everywhere in the world, right? And that part is missed by a lot of people. They don't understand that history. There's even doctors in writings in the 1700s who practiced for 40 or 50 years who expressed worry and concern about the sugar that was coming in and what it was doing to people and the tea and the whole thing. So it's a cool lesson to learn about. I always say we can't get out of a problem until we figure out how we got in it. And how we got in it was just culturally slow, way before the science. So here we are, like drinking and driving, when the science says, or smoking is probably a better analogy, when the science finally says we have to stop, it just takes a long time culturally. And that's kind of where we are today.
Thank you for that explanation. It's amazing that was written about so long ago. I learned about a lot of that stuff primarily through the writing of Gary Taubes and his amazing book, The Case Against Sugar. He talks a little bit about that history, and you realize like how exponential our sugar consumption got because of that trade and how quickly that situation just spiraled. And yeah, I was asking you about the date of the book and when it was written and some of the things it was talking about, because that would have been right kind of when the idea that fat in the diet was really bad for us and fat was the thing causing heart attacks, and there was a little bit of pushback and other doctors saying, like, wait, maybe it's not the fat, maybe it's not the cholesterol, maybe it's the sugar that's causing inflammation that is then causing problems and heart attacks. And that kind of voice got largely ignored and pushed aside for the diet heart hypothesis. So do you recall, did this book say anything in particular about diet, or was it just that you needed to remove sugar or avoid sugar at all costs?
It's hard to remember, but I know that he
Yeah.
liked soup. I do remember that he liked to make soup. It was easier for him. But your history memory is good. Right about the same time, John Yudkin, or I think it's yeah, John Yudkin was alive, right? And Yudkin was a guy in Great Britain who was doing exactly what you were saying. He was preaching that sugar was the devil or whatever, basically. And there was a guy named Ansel Keys in the United States who had treated President Eisenhower for his heart attack, and he became like this very influential, almost a bully about that the fat had caused the heart attack, and that the fat was the problem. And he became very famous and very influential in the world and in politics and everything. And he was a politico basically, and his opinion was used. And then Harvard, I don't know, the sugar industry paid Harvard, and they made a false claim that it was the fat and not the sugar. And that's how we got in this mess, right? This history is very well documented. Okay, there's not like a if man maybe sorta this is very well documented. And if someone would just take the time to read up on it, a lot of people are preaching it now if you're plugged into that. And once you listen to this, guys, if you listen to this podcast, just research the people that Casey's talking about, Gary Taubes, and get these people in your feed, and you'll see that they're always talking about this Yudkin versus Ansel Keys in the 70s and 80s. It was actually the 50s, the 60s and 70s, but this idea that we got into this thing that fat was the enemy, right? Fat was bad, and everything went low fat. And at the same time, in 1984-ish, high fructose corn syrup hit the market right after that. And from that point, from 1988, the early 1980s on, the obesity number, or the obesity percentages just skyrocketed
Wow.
from like,
Yeah.
6 or 8% up to what it is today. Over two-thirds of the United States is overweight, a third of the whole population, over 100 million people are obese. And along with that, 72% of obese people self identify as sugar addicts. That's almost 100 million people in and of itself, right? And so that's a problem. It's an issue, and
Yeah.
it's not well known. So thank you for guys like you who are allowing, crazy sugar-free guys to talk about it all.
Well, it's such an important message. And like you said, not a lot of people know about it. We've mentioned some already in this conversation, but let's talk a little bit about the deleterious effects of sugar. We can start in the brain and maybe work ourselves down. You mentioned obesity. You mentioned, joint pain, eyesight, all kinds of stuff. Can we talk about some of the other harms of sugar?
Sure, I'd love to. And I want to do something that I've been doing, and it's catching a little bit of traction. And what it is a delineation I've been doing between the body and the brain and the emotions. Okay. And what it is simple is that for 100 years, we've been studying the body, right? And now the accumulated information, basically in the last 20 years about the body, is so scientifically good that it causes fatty liver, it causes, or contributes to, let's put it this way, to obesity, but can cause fatty liver, which is an alcoholic's disease. And now we have an epidemic of 5-year-olds that have fatty liver, okay? Fatty liver. And we all know about the fatty liver, and we all know about the obesity, and we all know about a heart disease and et cetera, the diabetes and now possibly Alzheimer's. When I was young, they used to call diabetes sugar. That was the name of the disease. So I can remember distinctly my young friend in second or third grade said, I have sugar. I said, what the hell is sugar? And she said, well, he said, it's a disease. You know what I mean? I have the sugar, they used to call it. And so anyway, I delineate that with what's now called metabolic psychiatry, which is the brain and emotions, folks, how it is affecting the brain. Again, they're calling Alzheimer's diabetes 3. Now they've drawn parallels to Parkinson's. As I mentioned with my kids, like brain development. This is a cool story, and only in the way it's so telling is that I we have hundreds of 100-pound weight losses, hundreds of type 2 remissions. But when I do surveys of the folks that had success with us, the number one thing they always talk about has nothing to do with weight loss or diabetes remission. It has to do that their brain came back online. They can focus better. They can remember better. The foggy brain lifts, right? They just thought they were starting to get forgetful, right? Anxiety is less. They sleep better. It's all about the brain. And the advancements in metabolic psychiatry are so great that it's just making me crazy. I mean, we could go on forever about the deleterious, I like that word, deleterious effects of the body. And it's all true, and obesity. But what I want people, and this is why I want people to start to lean into this idea that it affects the brain. I mean, David Perlmutter, sugar shrinks your brain. Daniel Amen, you get holes in your brain. He does the scans, 45,000 scans on people. When you eat a high sugar, ultra processed carbohydrate diet, you get holes in your brain. Holes.
Wow.
Like, and so the reason I want you to focus on this is because what this comes down to is what we discussed earlier, is the behavioral change required to stop. And that is from the frontal cortex. I've been getting kind of strong on this lately. I've been telling people when they come to me and they think I'm nuts, but I'm used to that now. They, they say, I tell them they are not able to make a decision right now. If they come to me, if they have raised their hand and said, I would like to quit sugar and I'm overweight or I have type 2 diabetes, they're not able to make the decision required to move the process forward. Now, how do I know this? I know this because 6 months later, when they get honest with me after they lost some weight or put the type 2 in remission, they tell me these are lawyers, these are entrepreneurs, these are doctors, therapists, these are people who are brilliant professors. They say to me, Mike, when I first met you, I would pour dishwashing liquid on the cake, throw it away, and come back an hour later and cut off the part that didn't have dishwashing liquid on it and eat.
Wow. Wow.
And it's like, and they say other things like how much stuff they used to hide in the car so their kids didn't see it, or their husband didn't see it, or their stash that they had under their bed or in their office drawer. Like they start to get honest. They don't tell me all this up front. They tell me 6 months later, right? And so I know, and the science is very clear and backs this up, is that it pulls blood from your frontal cortex, the command center of the brain, more to the midbrain and limbic brain. And all the limbic brain and midbrain wants is their dopamine. That's it. It's not prejudice. It doesn't care how it gets it. You could exercise, you could make love, you could watch the sunset, you could do whatever. But we figured out an easy button. We figured out how to hack a couple million years of evolution and sit on the couch and get that same feeling that would advance the species for sex and gathering food, which is dopamine, that reward system, by eating sugar on the couch, right? So there's no need to go exercise. There's, you know what I mean? It's like they get the same feeling. And so it's, again, it takes about the arc of a podcast to kind of lay this whole, I don't want to say argument, but explanation out, of 17 years now. I opened sugaraddiction.com in 2009, of just being immersed in this, right? I mean, in interviewing hundreds and hundreds of the experts and watching the experts grow. And the only thing that's missing is this getting it out to the folks. Dr. Lustig, one of my mentors and, probably the most recognizable voice in the movement, says this is a 30-year process, a process to get, uh, he says the older guys have to die, but that's probably true. Uh, but, I mean, it's just kind of, it's hard for me because I see the pain. 20% of the, like I mentioned, 20% of the people that call me are crying. They've never told another living soul the stuff that about the throwing it away and, eating it later and whatever, and going out in a snowstorm for ice cream and, that kind of thing. So
There's
anyway,
some wild stories out there. Yeah, that's very
yeah.
interesting. When somebody tells you like, "Hey, well, we are omnivores," you mentioned gathering food. We are omnivores. Sugar is a form of energy. We've evolved with it. We've had fruit around, and we eat fruit. How and if they use that argument to say that sugar is fine, and again, we are omnivores and we can eat it, how do you respond to that to make somebody realize that sugar today is a little bit different?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And my main man there is a guy named Richard, hold on a second, Richard Johnson. And the study is uh, of fructose. One of my favorite sayings is, if you want to get off sugar, study fructose, also pronounced fructose. So if you want to get off, if you want to quit sugar, if you think it's important to you, study fructose. And here's why. So 300 years ago, which is not that long ago, really, in the grand scheme of things, um, we got the fruit that existed was those little nasty crab apples that you see, or the little berries that you see that are also quite nasty. But once they're ripe, um, then they're okay. Anyway, over the 300-year period, what we've done is we have hybridized that fruit to what you know of today. Again, that same gap of culturally slow. No one's alive that remembers we didn't have, stuff, grocery stores filled with this colorful, beautiful, big packages, right? And seedless stuff that can't propagate in nature. I mean, fructose is a completely vestigial product. Vestigial means it has no function in the human body, zero. Now that's Dr. Lustig, but I actually believe it does have a function. And so does, and that function is, I believe it's a psychoactive drug. Okay. And that drug is to make you feel a little bit better, to get a little bit of dopamine, and to irritate your digestive system and go poop the seeds out away from the original bush. Okay. And so it does have a couple of functions, right? And here's the most important part of the fructose story is that fructose, A, is a psychoactive drug, okay? And B is that, wait, I got to get this straight because it's important. Fructose is a psychoactive drug, and biochemically it doesn't have these functions. It's sweet, so you always are craving it, right? But we got, this is true, once or twice a year, or 3 times if you wanted to risk getting some honey from a bee, and get stung. That was it, and only at peak ripeness. Only you didn't get it like a green apple. You did not eat those. We were not attracted to them, and so we would eat it. And the animals would, they've seen it in the wild. They'll come in and clear a whole tree or a whole bush or a whole area in about a day or two, but only at peak ripeness, right? And they have defensive chemicals in them when they're green or not ripe, right? And so fructose is, Richard Johnson has literally got a grant from the government, and it just published a paper about it where he believes that they can cure alcoholism by blocking the fructose pathway. The science around this is amazing. And I forgot, and I got a little lost there, but the thing that I was going to say is and to answer your question and to hopefully put a cap on this is that the fructose molecule in sugar is exactly the same molecule that is in table sugar. There's no difference. The argument in my world does not, even with the eminent Dr. Lustig, does not hold water that you create a fiber lattice that makes the fructose pass slower, okay, instead of hitting all at the same time, the liver and the whole thing, right? But it's the same molecule. And if you ascribe to my belief system that it is a psychoactive drug that makes you feel a little bit better, in Dr. Johnson's work, there's a lot of studies that it creates a natural craving for more food. It creates risky behavior. So you're out there doing risky things to get to the sugar. There's one scene, it's a great scene in uh, the the Netflix film Chimp Empire, where they have 2 areas, right? That the chimps have, one area is a stronger band, and then the smaller band had to get into their territory to get to this one tree that only blooms twice or once every 2 or 3 years. And one of the chimps got killed trying to get to that tree. Like they would go in trying to get into the other. I mean, these are extrapolations that just a crazy guy who spent, 16 or 18 years studying all this stuff and worked with tens of thousands of people have, conclusions that I've drawn. And so I don't know. It's really, again, I want to thank you for allowing, because I'm stretching a little bit right now. Some of the things I'm mentioning, I've never said publicly because it's been a little scary because you get a lot of hate, People are wed to these ideas. They're wed to these constructs of eat less and exercise more, that that fruit is healthy or health. And look, I'm not saying you can't eat a little fruit. You can eat some berries and whatever. But here's the most important part in the behavior, which I think is what people want to hear and are listening for, is the behavioral change that they need. The fruit will keep the cravings alive. I say that a lot. Keep the cravings alive. And who in God's green earth, who would want to do this if they continue to fight cravings? If they continue to have an angel on one shoulder, a devil on the other shoulder, and they say, eat it, it's okay, you deserve it, it's only a candy bar. Don't do it because you'll be craving more sugar later. Do it. It's like, who wants to live like that? You need peace. And the only way to get peace, okay, guys, you listened this far, the only way to get peace is abstinence. And abstinence, 100% abstinence, is easier than 98% abstinence
Agreed.
because that same phrase, it keeps the cravings alive.
Man, I agree. That was so well explained, and there's so much context and nuance to, especially that story around fruit. I would explain it exactly the same way. I think Richard Johnson's work is absolutely amazing. He wrote the amazing book, Nature Wants Us. Nature wants us to be fat, something along the lines. I'm paraphrasing. And
That's
here's the example that I will give. I've mentioned this several times on the show, but in my neighborhood, there are people that do gardens. They put a lot of work into gardens. Sometimes they move away, and there will be tomato plants that are hybridized. They have been bred. They are very sweet. They're delicious. They're absolutely amazing around here in the Salt Lake Valley. But they will go to waste. They'll just kind of sit there. And I'll notice, like if I'm walking by, I might, if one has fallen on the ground, I'll have a tomato, and it's so good. It is very sweet. They're warm. They're nothing like the tomatoes that you get from the grocery store. They have a lot of flavor. I do get very hungry. Like 20 to 30 minutes later, I notice my hunger comes back, and I don't want more tomatoes at that point. I want a candy bar. So that's part of what I noticed. But there comes a time, like that's only available for maybe a month. I'm talking like this is September, end of September. Somebody's already worked very hard through the summer to cultivate this garden. There is a day in October around here in the Salt Lake Valley where everything freezes. And I like tomatoes on that day just as much as I did the day before everything froze. But now those tomatoes are inaccessible to me. I can't get them. I could go to the store and buy really crappy cardboard flavored tomatoes, but the tomatoes that were growing that were delicious are now gone. They froze. They're not a food source anymore. And I still like them, but I can't have them anymore. And that's the difference. And what you're talking about, all the bright colors and everything you can find in, the produce aisle of the grocery store and all the other aisles with all the other big bright colors is available to everybody, no matter where you are on the planet, all day, every day, 365 days of the year. That's the big thing. It's not that like carbohydrates and sugar is terrible for you. It is in the quantities that we're having it. If it were only available for a week or two a year, the way it used to be, that would be a totally different thing. And I would imagine even for you, you live in Tampa, Florida, where it's usually quite warm. I know you're going through a bit of a cold snap right now. You probably
right.
don't walk around and just see like fruits and plants and sugar growing spontaneously for you to eat.
No, it's true. It's only a once a year occurrence for most fruits and vegetables. And the vegetables are, hybridized and the nuts are hybridized. One of the things people don't realize is that nuts, the popular nuts, the cashews, the pecans, those kind, there's a couple more, they're actually not nuts. They're drupes, drupes, drupes. They're the seeds of fruits that have been hybridized for what? To take the bitterness out, so that you can enjoy them, so there's more fructose. Strangest thing, this is a nut, and how they did it, I'll never know. Actually would love to research all this. But pistachios are the highest fructose nut on the market. And there's a couple of companies, you've probably seen them now in your grocery store because they have big end caps. And it's like they're killing it. They're selling like pistachios left and right because of this thing, right? And and the vegetables are the same. The vegetables we eat today have no resemblance to the vegetables that existed 300 years ago. They were all hybridized from one or two different plants into broccoli and kale and all this kind of stuff. Also carry quite a bit of fructose to hybridize that have to take the bitterness out of the greens. Most greens are a little bitter without any fructose. The arugulas and those, ones that have less fructose. And I think at the end of the day, when we have the diagnostic tools in 100 or maybe 50, 100 years, we're going to know this fructose story. When we have the diagnostic tools to understand what it's doing to our brain, what the effects are on our brain, what the psychoactive nature of this fructose. The glucose molecule, this is always the argument that we need sugar for the brain and what have you. This is what we run on. But the body can make it. It can make it from animal products. It's not like it can even make fructose, but that's another story and a very long one at that. But anyway, I mean, I think the theme of this has been this idea that you're very knowledgeable, like strangely knowledgeable for I would have put in the body group, you know what I mean, in the old days. And because I've been on a lot of how should we say, fitness type uh, podcast, and they're not quite keeping up with that. I'll be honest. They're not quite keeping up with what we're talking about right now.
Well, I'm a very slow learner. I can tell you that. And I still deal with this kind of stuff. I mean, I've been on a carnivore diet for almost 7 years now. And I went to a low carbohydrate conference in August, the Symposium for Metabolic Health. And the people I was staying with were not on carnivore, and they had a bowl of, kind of mixed nuts out and cashews. And they were delicious. I couldn't believe how good they were. They were so sweet. You're right. Like, I hadn't had nuts in a long time. They were
Right.
very, very sweet. And that kicked on probably a good 3 months of me not being able to stop myself from buying the giant container of cashews, salted cashews at Sam's Club. And it's nighttime and they're salty and it's a little, I'm just going to have some. So I just have some and then I have some more and then I have another handful and then I have a handful and a handful and a handful and a handful. And my digestion next day is terrible. My stomach hurts, my intestines hurt.
Oh,
And I go back to Sam's and I walk by and I put them in my cart. And I had to teach myself how to use the Sam's Club app to pay for everything when I'm at the back of the store after I bought my meat, so that I would have to like redo the process of buying everything if I wanted to buy the cashews that are in the front. It's ridiculous. It's so stupid. I know what they're going to do to me, and I still have to do measures like that to avoid it. It's crazy.
that's a cool story, man. And I hear that a lot. The first thing people begin to abuse when they get off sugar is nuts because they figure, oh, it's healthy, it's got healthy fats or whatever, but it's nuts. That's what they abuse. And they do the same story as they end up. It acts exactly like the once you step down and I call it heal up a little bit. Once you heal up a little bit, all of your stuff, then the nuts have that same effect, the same fructose-like effect on your body and your brain that the processed sugar did. So yeah, it's a real, I mean, again, at this juncture, it's really just pattern recognition. It's just understanding that so many people have gone before us. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, and then the people that we've worked with, we see it over and over and over again. The same process, the same behavior, the same stories of the nuts and whatever. I'll tell you a story. So I'm speaking at KetoCon before they changed to Hack Your Health in Austin, and I'm upstairs in a breakout room, standing room only, 180 people along the wall. And I figure, let me go hard on the addiction part. Like, let me talk up really, like, so that they take this home. Because I'm figuring I'm preaching to the choir at this juncture, at this event, right? So anyway, I say, I go really hard on the addiction part, and I say, any questions? And I get about 5 or 10 softball questions, right? And I said, well, I'll be outside on the balcony if you want to talk about it. One guy walks up, that's about it. This is a Friday morning. So for the rest of the weekend, I'm watching the other speakers and I'm walking around the area, the expo area, right? No exaggeration, of the 180, 40 to 50 people walk up to me and they say to me, you were talking to me. I love keto. I love carnivore, but I cannot put down the sugar. Like they were afraid, embarrassed, or whatever, to speak up at the event and ask a question or, say something. But, they felt comfortable, at least I felt good about that, but they felt comfortable coming up to me and telling me these stories. And the stories were all the same, almost identical, and very similar to your nut story, kind of.
We learned the hard way, my friend. And I was in that room actually. You just reminded me that I was there for that your talk. Essentially, I was in the standing
Okay.
room only part of it. And I do remember a few soft questions, but not many people asked about addiction. So it's interesting that they came up to you afterwards in that expo area so
Yeah.
frequently. Yeah, that's awesome. For somebody who they realize sugar is a problem for me. Sugar is a lot more ubiquitous than I thought. I'll hear a lot of people tell me like, "Oh, I'm quitting sugar for January, so the only things I'm eating is wheat bread and fruit and skim milk and nuts and seeds," like you said. And you're like, "Okay, well, that's all still sugar too." But for somebody who is recognizing that this is a problem, they do recognize that they're one of those people that is not the 90% and I can moderate 10%. They are 100% needs to be easier than 90%. How do you start to work with that person? What are some of the first steps?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So information, I think is easy these days. Everybody's got some kind of thing going on. What's not easy is the support. And, I could go through all the litany of, clean out the house and that kind of stuff. And what the withdrawals would be like. I've got a 30-day challenge where I just can't, I tell you every day. And if I did a good intake, or if we understand the person, most of the people that are attracted to us they're pretty addicted. Sometimes 300 pounds overweight. I started in late stage food addiction, so I'm familiar with those folks. And, you know, I can pretty much tell where you're going to be, like in day 5, day 7, day 10. And to revisit this kind of brain and body stuff, you're going to have withdrawals. Okay, that's just the thing. And you're going to have to stop, and you're going to have to change your diet, and you're going to have to prep food, and you have to do a lot of that stuff. But the most important part, and I don't want to leave this, and I do have another appointment here in a few minutes, but I do want to like stress this, is that what's going to happen at day 10, 15, it could be a little later, is there's going to be a huge emotional upset. You're not going to understand what happened to you. And this is, I probably said this twice and probably shouldn't say it a third time, but this one's really true. This is the most important thing you want to hear from this event, this podcast, is that the work, the work of getting off of sugar has nothing to do with what you put in your mouth. It doesn't have anything to do with food. It has to do with the fact that you emotionally use sugar, unconsciously now, emotionally use sugar to take the edge off of life, to block out trauma, to do whatever. The emotional eating people out there are confusing the hell out of the situation. They are like really throwing a monkey wrench in the works because they believe that um, uh, moderation is possible, right? And for some folks, it's just not. And when you go zero and you don't have any anymore, it's a very common construct in the world of alcohol and drugs that if you started using alcohol and drugs at 14 or 15, you stop growing emotionally, right? And no one extrapolates this backwards. You didn't start using uh, sugar at 14 or 15. You started using sugar at 4 or 5, probably in the womb, but you definitely started as a child. And the register in your child, just like the animal who remembers where the berry bush was for next year because of the dopamine, you get a little dopamine hit and you say to yourself, when I'm upset and crying, mom gives me a cookie and I feel better. So there's this little register in your dopamine, receptors that makes you remember. And then it gets worse as you get older. And it's like any drug. You need more for the same effect, first of all. And you don't do it consciously. And it doesn't say like, you're had a rough week and you say, I need a beer, man. I need a rough week. It's Friday and I'm gonna just buzz out here and have a couple beers. It doesn't manifest like that. It just says, wouldn't it be nice to have a little chocolate bar? Wouldn't it be nice to have a soda? Like this is the kind of culture we live in because we have it 24/7 drip. We can get it anywhere. Mostly even a child can get it for free if they've developed the skills that they need, and they will develop the skills they need because it feels good. But you've seen it at a 5-year-old birthday party, right? You've seen like when the cake and ice cream comes out, they're all hiding behind their mother's leg until that ice cream cake, and then they're bouncing off the walls.
Crackheads.
It's because they're feeling good, they're feeling powerful, they're feeling the effects of a psychoactive drug is what's happening.
Yeah.
And th when you get to be an adult, all you're doing is fighting off withdrawals. You don't have time to go into what I'm describing at day 10 or 15. You don't have time to get weepy or depressed. And you're not physically depressed. You're just resetting your dopamine, all of your dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, adrenal glands, endorphins, cannabinoid receptors, every brain and body chemical feel good reward system is being reset and it's going to be down a little, right? And so
Wow.
yeah, it's wild, man. I mean, it's just I just I have thanked you many times, but like this information one of the things that I'm studying right now is the internet and more, obviously. And the most valuable commodity on earth is attention, more than money, more than gold, more than anything. And as other things in the world pull people away, this food message, this sugar message, this drug message gets lost. It gets buried. And people just keep doing what they've always done. And the diet industry, which is, between estimates, who knows, 200 to 300 or 400 billion dollars a year, keeps saying eat less and exercise more. And they don't understand this idea that this is a chemical reaction, not calories. It's a chemical reaction in the body that causes the behavior and the diseases, right?
Well said.
Anyway,
Yeah. Well,
sorry.
we know you need to go, and we really appreciate this information. It's been an awesome episode, and we really appreciate your time and for taking time to be on our show today, Michael. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Sugardetox.com.
Excellent. We
Real,
will link that up. We'll link that up. We'll link up social media and also the book and the summit as well. We'll link all that so people can find that in the show notes. And like I said, you've been very generous with your time and your information and your wisdom. So thank you so very much, Michael, for all of your amazing work. And thank you for taking time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
You the same, man. Keep up the good work. This is your open-mindedness and your research is showing. So keep it up.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words and thank you for stopping by today. We really appreciate you.
Uh,
And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.